What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Fit, Healthy, and most of all, Happy podcast. I'm your coach and host, Josh, here with
his co-host and co-coach, KG, and I'm in the house.
And it is time to get motivated today. If you are joining us on video, the reason I have only one sleeve out is went through a little bit of a fall, was playing hockey, ended up dislocating my shoulder, which isn't fun, but I'm fired up. I'm taking the recovery really serious. I'm excited to dive into that, and it'll probably provide a great upcoming episode on how to recover from injuries faster. I'll share some more of my plan there, but if you're just wondering on video, I'm not hiding anything here under my sweater. Nothing too exciting there, but once again, we got a killer episode planned for you today. I'm personally fired up. The coffee's flowing, the sun's out, so a lot to be thankful for on this beautiful Monday. And we're going to jump into our primary question of the day. And this was a fun one I saw, and I actually created this off of a Reddit thread I found. And the question was, what are the best exercises that change your physique the most visually? And I thought this was a really fun question because we spoke a lot last week as well about like some of the worst exercises and things we'd want to avoid. And we mentioned how it's so different for everyone. There's things that Kyle could do that would be amazing for him, that would be really bad for me. And I was bragging last week, ironically, about having no shoulder problems and having a pretty bulletproof shoulder. So maybe that will be questioned a little bit as we go forward. But case in point, you need to adapt in your journey. You find some new movements that are phenomenal. You find some that aren't great. But I do find there are some movements that pretty universally lead to massive physique change. And these are some of my favorites to program. So I wrote some of my favorites here. I'm going to ask Kyle to chime in with a couple of his. But off the top of my head, and this was actually the top of the thread that was really cool. And this was the mention of lateral raises for just being amazing at popping your shoulder, helping you with that V look. And what's amazing about really capping out your delts, if you will, whether you're male or female, this is a fantastic thing to do because when you think of that superhero look, when you think of like the letter V, if you have a wide shoulder base and you can make yourself look wider by having more curved out delts, you'll actually make your waist look smaller and you'll actually present yourself as looking a lot bigger. And I find lateral raises are just money in terms of having your shoulder grow, really getting that width. They feel amazing. I think it's one of my favorite movements. I know Kyle personally really enjoys them quite a lot. And I thought this was a great mention. If you're not utilizing lateral raises, you're really missing out. And in general, like a lot of shoulder training through and through. So I actually started doing a new movement. I don't know what the technical name of it would be. We've been laying down on a bench, setting the cable up pretty much at the same level we're laying on the bench. And we've been pulling with that overhead with our arms straight overhead and getting a really nice full range of motion with the shoulder. And it's funny, as I've been looking at shoulder recovery, the mention that most of us don't actually raise our hands above our head all too often. When we exercise, we're not doing that all too often. So I've been doing that more, and I've actually had phenomenal shoulder health and mobility. And since this injury, I dislocated it. I ended up popping it back in myself. Long story short. And from there, it's obviously really like tight. It's in a sling. It's no fun. But I believe me having the shoulder mobility and health I had is going to contribute to my recovery. And as I've been doing my physio and trying to just build out of it, I've actually been able to enter a full range of motion, obviously with not a ton of confidence, very slowly, being very patient with it. But I'm very grateful for that because I find in general, some people will get the frozen shoulder or the dead shoulder, whatever it may be. And that's just because in general, you're not doing too much for that shoulder. You're hunched forward at a desk all day and you have kind of a crouch, you're overtraining chest. So in general, lateral raises are amazing. And I wanted to pair that with face pulls as well, alongside cross arm rear delt. Rear delt work is so amazing. Once again, for men and women, it should be a priority of your routine because it's actually going to pull you back. So naturally, you think there's so many things that pull us forward. They cause a hunch over. Guys training a lot of chest, girls having chests, and just in general typing, being hunched over, all these things can cause you to hunch forward and actually cause you to have some postural deficiencies. And face pulls and rear delt work in general are a great way to work against this and actually create some change. So those are like two of the things that really came to mind. And even rear delts, what's amazing about them, when you think of your shoulder, it's three heads, right? Deltoid. So you have your anterior head, your lateral head, and your posterior head. So the front, the side, and the back in layman's terms. And once you actually work all three, you create this really nice cap to your delt. It creates like a full circle around it, and it really makes your shoulders look full, muscular, and healthy. And it's such a big difference, someone who trains rear delts versus someone who doesn't. So in terms of visuals, this was probably two of my favorites to share.
Honestly, that was great. And it was a good reminder, like back in the day when we were learning about the, anatomy and whatnot, because it's like, when you look at most people, like a lot of guys will just do pressing, right? So as Josh mentioned, the posterior gets neglected because it's often not the thing that most people see, right? The first thing they see is the front of your shoulder, the side and stuff. So I really like that. And I got a note here just to make sure you have to follow us on Instagram, because there's a lot of things that we show you that we can't really show you as much here. So I've got to make a note by Monday. When this podcast comes out, we will post that exercise that Josh had mentioned, the overhead raise laying down. It's pretty unique, and funny enough, we were doing it the other day and someone's like, hey, could you leave this exact setup because I'm going to do it. And in my mind, I'm like, you're just copying us. Like, you haven't seen this before, because it's really unique. I'm telling you, like, it's one of those things that when Josh showed me it, like sometimes with a bad shoulder that I had for years, I'm like, this thing doesn't work too well. And it's an incredible movement. So make sure to follow us on Instagram there. My biggest thing I'm going to have to say is just going to have to be bench press. Like, especially within my last DEXA scan, I feel like as I started to increase more bench pressing, like I feel like it just gave me such great bang for my buck. And when you look at most movements, like I will say it's definitely beneficial to get more out of it. And what I mean by that is, like, bench press for me will target my chest really nicely, but because it's a nice pressing movement, it'll also get a bit of my shoulders, the anterior head, and then also get some triceps as well, which is just like a nice movement that, like, any compound to me will just do you so well. And I think a lot of people will miss out on it because it's such a hard thing. So I found that from me incorporating that more often with really good form, with some heavy load, that did me really well. And then I'll say, honestly, lat pull downs and any sort of rows to me is just like an absolute fundamental. Like, it's just something that helps the back so nicely. And those are going to be some of my staples that have helped in so many different ways over the years. And they'll always be staples probably for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it's really hard. If you know me and Kyle, I was tempted just to put compounds here as the big one. Like if I were to only do 3 movements, I'd be pretty happy benching, squatting, and deadlifting. And bench in particular, I think is funny because it gets a bad rep. And when I started lifting, I always say the story of I actively didn't bench press because I'm like, I don't want to have man boobs. That's silly. Like, but I didn't really understand what it was. I didn't understand pecs. It's funny how naive we are when we start. But in general with bench press too, I think there's such an attitude of like, I don't want to have a super muscular chest, especially for women. And I actually challenged a lot of my female clients to participate in the bench press. And the reason for this is what's cool about bench, squat, and deadlift is you should be able to pull your body weight up. You should be able to push your body weight off the ground, and you should be able to squat your body weight. Like, you should be able to move yourself quite well. And pressing power, because it's so uncommon and it's almost so impractical, because how often do you need to actually push something in the form of the bench press? Very rarely, but it's a great strength to train because you're actually going to build out your shoulders, you're going to build out your triceps, your chest, you're going to get a lot of upper body power, and it's a great way to really build that. And obviously you can temper this to be more accurate for you. You can do dumbbell press, you can do slow negatives, but in general, it is a really amazing feeling to be strong here. And especially if you want to put on upper body mass, I started actually widening my grip with bench, and you can really change your bench based on where you're at in your journey. And with that, obviously I was bringing in more of my shoulder, and I've noticed my shoulder develop more and more. Now that I have this injury, when I get back to bench, I'm probably going to have to go back to dumbbells, doing it slow, focusing on range of motion. I might actually bench a little bit narrower, which is something I recommend with people with shoulder problems. But within those movements, I'm actually able to get a lot of benefit, and it's definitely amazing just to be able to be strong in those. And with that as well, I just even wanted to share squats and deadlifts, as I mentioned. Like, squats are phenomenal, right? Everyone says like leg press is like a poor man's squat, and people get all upset about it. But squat is so fun because you need so much stability. It really maxes out your bracing, really shows you how to move weight to really sit down with it and stand up with it in a really healthy way. And they're hard for a reason, and that's because it's going to help you grow. It's going to help you develop. Nothing gets me more sore than like some killer squats. And then deadlifts as well are just such a great test of, there's this weight on the ground, can I pick it up? So in general, like these, even though you see them as strength-based movements, there's no hiding. I can hide very easily in my hypertrophy movements. You can do curls and stop 20 short. When there's a heavy weight, it's like, can I do this or not? And that's where I find compounds are so powerful, is it really shows you, hey, I can push myself. This is what intensity should feel like. I am a strong person. And you can gain quite a lot of confidence from that. So these are actually like big movers, especially if you want to put on a lot of muscle, or if you want to lose a lot of weight. You're going to burn a ton of calories, you're going to recruit a ton of muscles, and for that reason, these are absolutely phenomenal.
You know, I like that Josh said, like, if he were to just do a few movements, he'd be really happy doing those compounds. I can't say it'd be too, like, It's good. It feels incredible. Like it's just they're hard though. That's where so many people struggle. Like we did our powerlifting competition mock meet like last week, and I felt so fired up like lifting heavy weight. I got back to 500. I'm getting into my thoughts here a little bit earlier, but it was just like one of those things where when you do them, like, and especially you do them right, they're so incredible. And on that note of Josh mentioning the top 3 movements, like, you know, just being the compounds, if you were to just be able to do a few exercises, and I got to start by saying this is where people go wrong, is like most influencers out there are posting these crazy unique things where you're doing 2 things at once, where you're just doing something that looks sexier than it needs to be, right? So the main movements that you should be doing, and they must be done, and I would just do, if I only were to do 7 movements, it would be a squat, or sorry, starting off, it would be a push, which would be bench press, a pull, which would be deadlift, a squat, which would just be a squat, a hinge, which would be, it could be, you know, a stiff leg deadlift, it could be the Romanian like Josh had mentioned, it would be a heavy row, that would be an incorporated thing, and then it would be a carry, just because it's more functional, or some sort of carry, whether it's a farmer's walk or whatnot, and then I would add in maybe some hip thrusts, just because I think they're incredible, and everyone can benefit from them, from a postural standpoint, and everything like that. So once again, just the big thing to think about is that a lot of these are great movements, and I just see so many people overcomplicating it or doing things that may not work as well. Whereas like if I were to do a heavy row compared to just a bicep curl, the heavy row will get your back, it'll get your core because you have to stabilize, it'll get your biceps because you're doing a pulling movement which incorporates your biceps. So I always think of best bang for my buck, but that's my last thought, and I hope it gives you some things to think about.
Yeah, if you think like a hamburger has buns, carbs, it has veggies, it has cheese, it has protein. There's a lot that comes in it, and compounds are very much that way. There's obviously one thing it's more predominant in, but also you can get more into nuanced hypertrophy, and you can get like just the lettuce, just the onion, like with these more isometric based movements where it's just isolating one muscle, you're working it. But compounds are so powerful because it forces you to work them as a whole, to learn major patterns, like Kyle said, like hinging in particular is such a core of so much of you do. So it was really hard narrowing down this list and just sharing a few of our favorites. There are literally a million movements I love, and I think they all have a place. But the last really cool one I'll share, I think, and that's really underutilized, is, well, it's getting more popular now, but Romanian deadlifts for glutes and or stiff leg deadlifts. So either or, depending on your mobility and how confident you are. I really like stiff leg. A lot of people really like Romanian. They find they get great glute activation from that. But if you actually want to grow your glutes, this is a great way to do it. If you do it heavy, you do them with good control, I just find it really fires the glutes, and it's a really great way to build them out. So whether male or female, you want to grow your glutes, definitely be sure to implement them, as they're absolutely fantastic. But those are some of our favorites. We could definitely do a part 2. Like I said, these are kind of like my bread and butter. I program these quite significantly, and especially the shoulder stuff was on my mind. I was pretty excited to share that. So thought that was a pretty fun question. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And that is our first question of the day, but we got tons of more great content coming in this episode. So if you're new around here, this is Motivation Monday, where we answer your questions, share where we're at in our journey, and share some of our favorite quotes. And I'm going to pass off to Kyle to hear what his quote is of this week.
My quote for this week is, "The secret is there is no secret." People got excited when they heard that I was about to talk about a secret, but basically, yeah, like I said, the secret is there is no secret. Consistency over intensity, progress over perfection, fundamentals over fads, over and over again. So let's just break that down. When you think about it, like, everyone's looking for the secret. We get asked it quite often, whether it's at the sauna, whether it's at the change room, whether it's just on the gym floor, or just friends or whoever it is. And it's just, there really isn't one, right? And when you actually look at the things that I mentioned, like, let's start with consistency over intensity. I will beat someone who's very consistent over, like, you know, slightly intense, like here and there, any day of the week. Like, consistency will always beat intensity. And then also progression will always be perfection. That's another one of my favorite quotes, right? There's so many people who will only do things when they can feel like they can be perfect, but the people who are just slowly making progress will trickle along, and they'll get there 100% of the time, versus the person who will only do stuff when they can be perfect. And then obviously the fundamentals, just like some of the movements we just listed, when it comes to dieting, just doing what works, what's maybe not as sexy, but just gonna help you be consistent, versus like the fad diets that come out every single day. There's a new fad diet, there's a new trend, there's a new product, and just doing that over and over again. Being consistent, focusing on progress, doing the fundamentals is the recipe for success, and that is going to be the secret for today.
Yeah, this is true with anything. So I was saying to Kyle recently, I believe it was from a doctor, and they said the problem with recovery is no one actually listens to the exact instructions they're given. Like people will just read between the lines, do things like not as exact as they should be. And even as a coach, when we give our nutritional plan, we give everything. Those that follow it and the more accurate and consistent people are with it, and the more willing you are to do the small, tedious things, the better results you see. And those are always the best transformations. So even for me, so what happened since someone will ask probably is playing hockey. Basically, like this guy came towards me. I hit him. Well, I didn't hit him. He kind of went into me, had his head down, and I made a little comment. I just said, like, keep your head up, which I probably shouldn't have. And it upset him. And he came over and punched me in the face. I slipped, and then whatever, some scuffle of some kind happened, and I think he fell on me, and I went to put my arm down to try to land on it, and I just felt a pop. So my shoulder popped out, which sucked. I went into the hospital, and then in the waiting room, I Googled how to pop it back in, laid on my back, and I was able to get it back in, which was great. Got x-rays, and they're like, wow, it went back quite nice. It's not broken. I have another appointment on Friday, but I didn't know much about shoulder dislocations. And funny enough, Kyle actually dislocated his shoulder previously in a motorcycle accident, and he thought it was dislocated. They said it wasn't. So apparently for like 2 days he was waiting in just pain, and I was like in that waiting room dying, and I'm like, that's it, I'm just sorting this out myself. So it is pretty crazy. And I've seen movies and things, and people are like, my shoulder's dislocated, pop it in, and then they're good to go. But I didn't realize it's such a big deal, because when you dislocate it, you're ripping potentially muscle, tendon, your rotator cuff, whatever it may be. And that can be obviously very painful, and it can be very hard to regain a full ROM and all these different things. But it is hard, because when these things happen, we want to be fixed now. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to wait. I've seen different things. I've seen 3 months, I've seen 6 months, I've seen a year, I've seen your shoulder will never be the same. And I think it's real easy to like be upset about these things. And instead it's like, what do I actually need to do? What is the exact protocol? So I'm thankful I've personal trained some physiotherapists in the past, and I was given some advice there. I picked a few brains. I watched some YouTube videos. Obviously at the hospital, I didn't get any great advice yet, and I'll continue to seek out more advice. But time and time again, there's nothing I can do today that will heal me tomorrow. The secret to me coming through this is listening to what I need to do. So doing my physio exactly right, doing what I know works, which is getting a lot of protein, getting a lot of rest, not being a hero, wearing the sling, even though it looks ridiculous, filming a podcast with one arm hanging off my sweater. But like, that is the secret. And I know that's the secret. In the moment, it sucks. And I know also when I zoom out 3 months from now, I'd like to envision that I'm going to be in a great place, right? And it's different for everyone. I'm lucky that the severity of it wasn't too bad, but I'm feeling more optimistic. And I think embracing the reality of what you need to do, not overlooking these things. And it's funny because I got that physio plan, and one of them was wall walks with my fingers. So you stand to a wall and you walk your fingers up like you're doing like rainfall fingers up as high as you can. And I'm like, this is hard. And I'm supposed to do 10 reps with 5-second holds each time for 2 sets. I'm like, this is so freaking hard. Like 5 seconds, such a long hold. I'm going to do 4 reps and I'm going to do 2-second holds. And then immediately I'm like, oh, this is the problem. Like I need to listen to this. And obviously I was given guidelines, like if I feel pain to stop, but I could do it. It was just hard. And like, you want to like try and add in things and do more, do less. But a lot of the times it's just doing what we know we need to do, not like overlooking trivial things. So one of my biggest secrets is logging my food. And all the time I hear I'm too busy to log my food. And the reality is everyone's busy. We all have things going on. If you're too busy to log your food, logging your food just isn't a priority. And you not doing this thing that will take 2, 3, 4 minutes out of your day is costing you amazing results. You saying you're too busy to get to the gym because you can't do your hour-and-a-half workout that you want to do when you could do 45 minutes is costing you results. So the secret is no secret, I think, is incredibly fitting. And this was a great pivot, I think, into where I'm at. And even for me to identify that and to not overlook the small components of your journey. Like it's easy to be like, yo, I'm a tough guy. I don't need sleep. Screw this. Or I hurt my shoulder. I don't need a sling. I'm just going to start getting at it. And then you make it worse. So I think the reality is like knowing what you need to do, doing it with intention, doing it properly, doing it seriously, taking the small things seriously, because overlooking these things will just absolutely kill your journey. And that's why we mentioned it, because people in programming will go, oh, we'll say, how's your workout made for a new client? They'll say, it was great. I don't like lunges. I don't like squats. So I skip those. And we're like, no. And that's what's great about having a coach, because we'll call you out on that. And I tell people all the time, if you dislike a movement, it's like not causing you pain or anything, it's probably because it's hard. I hate Bulgarian split squats. I hate lunges. I hate a lot of, in particular, leg movements. There's a lot of things that just suck because they're freaking hard and they kill you. I don't even like seated military press because I suck at it and I'm like lankier, right? It's not fun, but I know these things are good for me and that's why I do it. So it's just a great reminder. And the more you embrace these things too, the easier it gets to do them consistently. Like logging my food, it just takes me like literally probably 20 seconds of my day, let alone the 2, 3, 4 minutes I mentioned. So don't overlook those small things. I love that quote. Anything you want to add before I pop into mine?
I just like that Josh mentioned that whole like kind of dealing with what's in front of him, because this morning in my daily Stoic book, it was talking about like anxiety and a lot of times how it comes from just the preconceived thoughts of like what we don't actually have control with. And it was a good reminder, because I thought of Josh instantly, because like he can only do what's in front of him and that's the best he can do, and that's what matters. Whereas like most of the times we become anxious and worried and scared when we're like thinking so far in advance, when it's like maybe travel plans, whether it's like the weather, whether it's the outcome of something going on, and we're doing it to ourselves. Like we don't even realize it, but you know, it's just one of those things that it's like when you focus on what's in front of you, what you can control, do that, everything will come into place. But if you're like, man, 1 month from now, I'm not sure about this and that and the other thing, but it's hard. Like I struggle with this myself sometimes. If I'm like, I want to know now or whatever it is, but just do what you can. That's what matters the most. And I thought that was well said.
Yeah, one of the most freeing things you can do is have a mature mindset. So I talked about this on Instagram, but I mentioned how I assume it was about 5 years ago now, I had an insurance issue with my motorcycle where they said, hey, we thought you were a different age, so it's going to be like 500 more bucks a month. And I'm like, that's ridiculous. One of my options, they're like, you could take it off insurance. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take it off. I'm going to sell it. That's a ridiculous price to pay. It was like a $10,000 bike. So it'd be $6,000 of insurance a year for a $10,000 bike, which is just silly. So I'm like, heck with that. And then the next day I go to my car and my motorcycle's not there. And I'm like, what the heck? Right? Someone stole it. Absolutely sucked. And I was thinking all these things. I shouldn't have taken off insurance, this, I shouldn't have done that. And oh, whatever, poor me. Like, and then I thought, you know what? What's done is done. I'm going to move forward. And like, it was so freeing to have that mature mindset. And even with this, like you get these moments where you're like, I shouldn't have went to hockey. I shouldn't have done this. If only I didn't put my arm down. And it's pointless. You can't go back and change it. And just the same, I can sit here and crying about my shoulder being not in a good place. I could do nothing. I could stay up late. I could eat garbage. And it's like all of these things are just going to take me further away and put me in more pain. It's going to make me feel more like a victim. And even Alex Hormozi today, I saw him and it was like the power finger. So if I say my life sucks because of Kyle and I point at Kyle and I'm like, Kyle ruined my life, he did all these things, he has the power over me. If it's like the government ruined my life, they have the power over me. If it's always someone else, or if you look at yourself, you're like, what can I do? Then I'm giving myself the power. So in this case, I'm like, I can take this recovery super seriously. I can deal with what's in front of me. I'm going to accept what happened. And it's like, it's way more freeing and I say this a lot, but you don't feel like a victim to it. So it's hard to think this way, and it's like a muscle. It doesn't come naturally to me because I'm as bad as everyone else. I immediately had those thoughts, and I've just been saying, like, I'm not going to entertain that. I'm going to move forward. So definitely what's on my mind. And then I look for silver linings. I'm like, okay, it's my non-dominant hand. That is a huge blessing because as annoying as it is using one hand to type and stuff, it's like, it's my dominant hand. I was in that hospital, and I saw, like, parents crying over their kids in, like, hospital beds and stuff. And I'm like, hey, just a shoulder. Life's going to go on, whatever. And also I'm like, hey, this opportunity to talk about my journey and to maybe inspire someone else. It was even awesome seeing one of the other clients in our program mention an ACL injury and how the mindset encouraged her, and we're going to both push forward with this together. So once again, a lot of opportunity there, and a great quote from Coach Kyle. But my quote is, nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. And I feel like the less we know things, the scarier it is. And oftentimes when you want to get in the gym and you know nothing, it's very intimidating and it's scarier. And the easiest way to like clear some of that fear is just to face things head on, to learn to accept failure, even just like little tedious things in life that are annoying that you can build up and overthink. Oftentimes it's just a gap of you not having knowledge or awareness to what it is you need to do. And even with the shoulder injury as an example, I right away went to my network to see like whose brains I could pick. I'm like, do I have any nurse I want to ask things to, or doctors or surgeons, or do I have physios? And like getting different opinions, obviously, and working within that, getting understanding, knowing what I need to do, learning how to be comfortable in a sling, like all these different things. Like there's always an opportunity with it. And I find the more you research, the more you understand, the more freeing it is.
Yeah, that was so well said. And on that note of like the whole like kind of victim card and whatnot, and just like blaming and pointing and all that stuff, I thought that was so well said, because I feel like this, like whenever something happens, like you can apply that like mindset to anything, whether it's like when my truck was stolen a year and a half ago, okay, all this stuff that we're talking about here, how to handle things, like this can be applied here. Whether it's like your kid comes home and you have to deal with something that you're not happy with, all right, let's use all of these tips and these strategies and everything here as well. Injury takes place, like a lot of it is just that mature mindset, is just like dealing with things the way that they need to be dealt with, like not pointing fingers, not, even blaming yourself. Like Josh said, like there's so many times where, when let's say my truck got stolen, I'd be like, man, I should have known better. And it's just like, it doesn't help, right? And I always ask like, what's gonna help the situation? So just a good reminder, because I know so many people, and believe me when I say this, like whether it's even a family member of mine and I see them upset about something, I have to come in and just be like, no, like everything's okay. Like it doesn't need to be like this. It wasn't your fault, or kind of just point things out, right? And a lot of times people will have really good advice for other people, like it's helping their best friend through something, and then for themselves, they'll just do everything they go against, and it just doesn't have to be that way. So I thought that was so well said. And I also want to mention one thing. I was listening to a podcast this morning. He was an online fitness coach, and he was talking to his business mentor. I just kind of chime in there and listen to some stuff. And he was basically, the one guy was saying how he was losing all these in-person clients and he has to switch online. And the mentor had said like, this is a blessing in disguise. Like everything happens for a reason. And it just instantly got me to turn it off and think about how many of those blessings in disguise there's been in my life. Even for us, obviously throughout COVID, we had to transition fully online, even though we were already online quite a bit. But it was one of those things where it felt like the world was coming down on us. We're gonna lose all these people, and how are we gonna do this? And then income's going down, and you're just like, holy, like it sucks. And then it's just like, you know what? It was a blessing in disguise. We figured it out. We did a challenge for everyone. We had about 70 to 80 people come in. We were full on time, or full online. It worked out for a reason. So easier said than done, but when things happen, it's always a good reminder to think, hey, maybe I'm learning something. Maybe this could be something of benefit, and it's a blessing in disguise of some way. I don't know how, I don't know in what way, but that's something to think about for sure.
Yeah, even just seeing things as challenges or puzzles, right? If silly as it sounds, if you can gamify it, I'm going to gamify healing as intelligently as I can, and learning about this and getting stronger and learning how to prevent it, or I'm going to learn how to make that pivot in my business or my life. So that was a great point. And I want to speak now. Well, we're going to do a client shout out of someone who is struggling, who's crushed it. So who do we have this week?
So this week, we felt like we needed to highlight a ton of big past transformations. The other day we were, making a post saying like, we're trying to make some content on how much people need to lose, whether some people need to lose 5, 10, 15, 20 pounds. And it just got me thinking about how many people have come into our program and have actually lost anywhere between 50 and 150 pounds. Because like when it comes down to it, to lose 20 pounds, there's a really big mindset shift that needs to take place, the proper programming. A lot needs to be taken into consideration, don't get me wrong, but for the people who have done 50 plus, like it's a whole identity change. Like the person that they were before is 100%, they're not the person they end up being when they lose so much weight, when their habits change, when their identity changes. And so, I've just got to give some credit. Like we're just so proud, and just it makes us so happy to see all the people who have showed up for themselves. They don't just come in here for a quick like vacation shred, and hey, we absolutely specialize in helping that, but it's the people whose like entire lives are changed. They're able to run around with their kids more. They're able to have kids. Like some people come in and they say, hey, I want to be able to have kids. Like that's one of our biggest goals, help me lose weight. And we do it. Their injuries go away because they're more mobile, because they're stronger. Like every part of their life improve. So we've had some insane transformations. So we'll just do a full recap. We'll have some on the screen right here. And then on Instagram, you can go over and check out some of the top 10 within the last little while. It's hard to choose. We may be able to do 20. I think that's how Instagram works now. I'd love to be able to do 100, but just so proud of everyone that shows up and has come into our program.
Yeah, it's been such an amazing reflection over the last 10 or so years of coaching and seeing all the different types of transformation. And huge, keep in mind, isn't just massive weight loss. Like huge oftentimes is someone who is doing good, but they've never been able to be great. They've never been able to look how they wanted to look or find the balance to be able to have their favorite foods and have balance or whatever it may be. Like it looks different for everyone, or that mother who finally became strong and did her first meet. So there's just so many amazing stories within there, and we're really excited to share it. And it's always hard to narrow down, but we'd love for you to be that next amazing story. No matter what your goal is, we will get you there faster with more balance and more accountability so you can become good to great. If you want to learn more about working with myself and Kyle one-on-one, first link is our website, no obligation, no pressure. You can check that out. If you've been thinking about it, now is a great time because summer bodies are made in the winter. It's great seeing that light out of the end of the tunnel, having something to be excited for. And obviously I got some great time on my hands right now. So I'm looking forward to helping some more amazing people such as yourself get closer to their goals. So go ahead, check out our website there to learn more. But now we're going to jump into our second question. And this is a fun one. And that is, what is the worst fitness advice you've ever been given? So we made no notes here. We just have the question. I wanted to free ball it a bit. And I think one of the funniest ones for me was, I remember I was at the gym and there's this guy that would walk around the gym. He always wore a belt. And he just looked like kind of like, like a hippie biker type of dude. He was definitely probably 70 or 80. And I respect him for being in there. He's a beast. But we called him coach because when we started, no matter what we did, he'd come over and give us some advice. And sometimes advice in the gym is fantastic. Sometimes it gets a little bit annoying when it's not asked for, which can be a little bit tough. So I'm always tentative to give anyone advice because I don't know someone's full situation. If they want it, they're going to be receptive of it. Nonetheless, we were deadlifting and we were really working on our form that day. And he came over and he said, when you deadlift, you want to curve your back as much as you can because that's where the power comes from, your spine. And we're like, is this guy trolling? Like, is he trying to kill us here? And then we saw him doing deadlifts. And I'm like, I don't know how this guy still has a back. And the whole reason you don't want to do this is your spine just has these little bursts at your vertebrae. They have these tiny little pockets. They are not strong. There's no muscle there, right? You have muscle in your back around it. And by doing that, you're putting yourself in such a bad position. Whereas when I'm using my glutes, my lower back, my posterior chain, and I'm really just building through that and I'm bracing through my abs, that's where your power comes from. That's where your strength comes from. So to me, that was like literally by far the worst advice I've ever been given. And one thing I always loved, and when I started lifting, I would ask as many people as I can for advice. And to this day, I always believe someone could be wrong about 9 out of 10 things and they could be very right about one thing. So I find picking people's brains, listening to what they have to say, challenging it, seeing if you can cross-reference it, looking up studies, seeing if it makes sense. But it doesn't hurt to try to see what you can learn from people. And even if you disagree with 90% of what someone says, there's still things you could learn. Like I could learn from that individual the importance of consistently showing up to the gym. Like if he's that old and he still looked decent for 80 and he's able to deadlift at 80 or whatever it may be, even incorrectly, like it shows the resilience he's built up just from showing up to the gym. So that's something I can learn from him, is being consistent, even though he's giving really bad advice. But that by far was the worst I've been given. What about you?
Mine, I'm trying to think like one-on-one, like specific scenario. This is the first thing I think about. So this is what's fun about this is the gentleman that came up to us and he was basically telling us we should never arc on a bench press. And he was very adamant on it and very persistent. I definitely got a little bit rude. Like I'm okay with someone giving feedback, but I think it was just one of those things he kept pushing. And I was like, okay, well, I don't actually remember what I said, but I just remember kind of being like, hey, leave us alone. Like we're doing our way and this is what we're going to do. But like the truth is when it comes to even like a bench press, like when you arc, you're actually protecting your shoulder and it is completely normal, especially powerlifting standards. It's actually very safe. I know there's a lot of people online who will get so like upset about it when they see it, but I just remember him just saying, like that you should never do that. And I think it came from an injury that he had as well. So it's one of those things where it's like, sometimes you'll give advice based off of like something that you're passionate about or that like maybe you really want to save someone from, but I just didn't think that was the greatest advice ever. So that's the main thing there. But the other thing I would say is really just all the unsustainable, The advice, I hear it so much, especially in like the sauna, especially at gyms, like people will kind of just be like, oh, I've been on no carbs for a week. Like you have to do it this way. And like, I'd say a lot of those people end up like just never being consistent with it. Before I was saying how important it is. So I would say most of the like really bad advice has just been like the fad stuff, the things where someone finally heard about this random diet. And I can't pinpoint an exact scenario, but I just hear it so often because people are so quick to jump to it. Or those who are like drinking a specific supplement drink who say their insulin's so much better and all this other stuff. And I think they do know to kind of leave us alone because they know that we believe in like what actually works, consistency. We don't buy into that. So I think it's kind of nice there since people know that's what we do for a living. But yeah, a lot of it's just the unsustainable advice that I've heard quite often, especially when I first began. There was so much of that silly business.
Yeah, personal experience is so dangerous as well because if I look phenomenal and I do fasted cardio, and I'm probably going to run around and tell everyone it's because I do fasted cardio, but it might not account for the fact that I have a certain same amount of calories every day and my protein's really high, I'm doing all these things right, or maybe someone looks amazing and they're an enhanced athlete. And just the same, people become scared of things, right? Like Kyle hurt himself doing dumbbell bench press. He could run around saying to everyone, don't do this. This messed me up. It's the worst exercise. Avoid it, avoid it, avoid it. And it's like doing it wrong, obviously, is silly. But just because Kyle did something silly while he was doing it doesn't mean it's a bad exercise. And usually people will be pretty loud about these things. And in general, too, I think some of the other worst advice I've gotten is like, oh, enjoy looking like this while you can. Because when I had kids, now I look like this. And it's like your children didn't make you look worse. Like, yes, you're busy. Yes, there's way more demand and it would require you to level up. But I always remember people would always say that, or once you get older, or once you get a job, there's always something, and it's easier to like give yourself that out. But instead it's like, ask yourself. Obviously people can make their own decisions, but like don't put something in front of as to why you can't get something done, because then you're just truthfully making a mistake, whether it be your job, your kids, your whatever it may be, like your health. Like even for me, like what am I just going to stop lifting and never lift again because my shoulder's bad? No, I had a surgery before. That's not going to stop me either. So I think just learning how to navigate within life and really just keeping to your journey and hearing people out. And even when we were lifting really heavy, I left the sauna earlier than Kyle and our friend Jeremy, but Kyle had said to us like, wow, that's so cool that you guys are so strong. Like I used to be like that, but I have kids. And then Kyle's like, well, actually, we all have kids. Josh has 2 kids. I have a kid. Our buddy Jeremy has a kid. And it's like pretty funny, right? Because you take away that power a bit. And it's sometimes in our head, we need to be careful because it's easy to hold these excuses so high and have them be the reason why we're not doing what we know we could do. And I think sometimes calling yourself out and saying like, what action do I need to change? Maybe I need to stop eating so much at night. I need to use my free time instead of scrolling Instagram. I need to get over to the gym within what's reasonable. I need to work with my partner to make sure we both have the time to get to the gym and prioritize health in our household. So all these different things.
Yeah, that was so well said. And I mean, I've heard that so much too, right? Like people will say that exact thing, like a specific age or specific time, or it's just like wait until, and then like fill in the blank. And it's not really like advice, but it kind of is, because they're saying wait until like something specifically happens. And you're like, all right, I'll be waiting, but I'm going to always put in that work to just like combat that, like Josh said, it'll be that kid thing. It'll be that, second kid thing. It'll be whatever it is. But yeah, there's just so much bad advice out there. And I think one of my biggest tips is, like Josh said, was at the very beginning, just be careful who you listen to. And especially like online, like you may not get too much bad advice like in person, because people do typically keep to their own. And even us as personal trainers and coaches, like I will never go out of my way to just like be like, hey, I think you should do this. Like that's not my place. As long as someone's not going to get injured, hey, you do your thing and you'll learn eventually, and that's what's most important. If they show up, that's awesome. But online specifically is where you'll just be scrolling like a specific night and you'll see, okay, don't eat bread, never have this. Okay, you should be doing fasted cardio. And then just like there's a million different things. So I would say like there's just a lot of bad advice out there. So try to stick to like 2 or 3 people you really trust who, are kind of on the same page, roughly, maybe the same, just understanding, I guess you could say, because yeah, there's just a lot of that bad stuff out there. But that's my final note for that question.
Yeah, I've seen so many things too. It's like someone you know who's always like super out of shape always has the most advice on like how you could get in shape. So it's so funny. Or like you have buddies that have no money that say, "Oh, you could be rich if you just do X, this, or that." So I like picking people's brains. I truly believe you can learn something from everyone, but you do want to be careful with what advice you're implementing. And once again, we work really hard here to make sure our advice is great. So if you like our podcast, always means the world if you leave a review. We haven't asked for this in a while, so if you haven't, it really would mean a lot. You can do this on Spotify or iTunes. 5-star review is always appreciated. If you don't think our podcast is 5 stars, we'd love to hear why. Shoot us a message on Instagram. We're always looking to improve, do better, give better advice. But it really mean a lot if you took 2 seconds to leave a review. And I know you're probably thinking, I'm not going to do this. Someone else will. But I'm calling you out. If you doing this, you're listening to this right now, could take the 2 seconds, you appreciate what we do, it would really help us out because pumps the podcast out more, helps us grow, and helps us make more incredible episodes down the road. But now we're going to jump into our third and final question. How can I deal with cravings? I seem to give in every night and go overboard, and this is the reason I can never succeed in my diet.
So this is a great question, and I think the first thing is understanding what type of person you are. So there definitely are, like, on one side, there's people who will just do better from straight up restriction, and just like the second that they give in, they completely go overboard. So let's say if you are trying to follow flexible dieting and you have a cookie and you want to fit it in and it fits your calories, you log it, you're like, okay, I'm good. But because you've had that cookie, you then have a second cookie, a third, a fourth, a fifth. That probably isn't the best for you because the second you open that floodgate, you just go overboard. Now, there's some people on the other side that will just simply incorporate it into their day and they'll be totally fine. I think this is the best way to do it, especially if you can just stop at 1 and then just stop at 2, whatever the case is. But I would say it's totally fine to be able to do that for most people. Especially I find that if you do allow yourself to like have that thing that you're craving, if it fits within your calories, it does set you up for longer term success. Because I know some people, they'll say no, and because they've restricted so much, then the weekend will come, and because they've said no all week, then they go to that party where they have like snacks there or whatever it is, and they're like, I need everything. So I don't think this is usually the best approach. So like for most people, my biggest tip is just to find a way to incorporate it. And for when it comes down to it, we're big fans of flexible dieting. So if you have 90% healthy whole foods and then you have your one little post-dinner snack or whatever it is, you can still totally see great success. Like I'm just saying a cookie as an example. It could be a 150 calorie cookie. It's not gonna mess with your overall gains. It's not gonna make you gain any fat, like nothing like that. And that will be totally fine. But I would say aside from that, try to find different alternatives, right? Because if you do always give in, it gets tough because you're just naturally used to like always accepting that extra thing, whether it's like a cookie or some sort of ice cream desserts and all this other stuff. And then just naturally like you're always having it just because. But there are definitely a lot of healthy alternatives out there and you could switch it up. Like let's just say you're craving something sweet after dinner, and instead of having that typical thing you have a cup of blueberries, which are filled with antioxidants. It's very filling. There's some good fiber in there. It still gives you that sweet tooth craving. And it can still do such incredible things for your body. You'll have less calories of it. You're not going to be doing anything, it's still very beneficial. So I would say one of the greatest things you can do is also look for those alternatives, so that way you can incorporate it in and still enjoy that fun little thing. But there's so many great options out there. And even let's say a bag of chips, for example, if I have some sort of Miss Vicky salt and vinegar big bag of chips, I bring that in, I say, I'm just going to have a bit. I'm gonna have 1,000 calories worth, but if I have my Quest chips and incorporate that, it's high protein, it's a great snack, it gives me that satisfaction. And so there's so many good like hacks out there that I would really recommend for most people as well. Any tips?
Yeah, so great advice. And there's a million ways to approach this, but what has really worked for me is I prefer bigger meals. So I've really tried to embrace that, and I just feel better personally with bigger meals. I like the food cutoff time. I think 3-2-1 is the easiest rule. So 3 hours before bed, stop eating. 2 hours before bed, stop having water. 1 hour before bed, don't do any like just screen time, if you will. And I find that is a really simple system to follow. And I find that cutoff is a little bit freeing because I've said it before, after 8 p.m., most of what we eat is junk. We don't really need it. You get potential digestion challenges when you're sleeping. So it's better, in my opinion, just to avoid it. And it's more freeing because most often that time you're doing nothing, you're bored, something's tempting you, you'll be happy for 2 seconds. So with the way I think logically, I'm like, it's just going to make me feel worse. first. I'll finish my calories. I'll fill out my spreadsheet. To me, it's like I've completed that day. My fitness pal used to be able to mark the log as done. I think you still can, but like, to me, completing that has been really freeing. I really like that analogy too. I think Andrew Huberman said that snacking is for children. And ever since, I've kind of been like, why do I need a snack? You know, like I'm an adult here. Like when I'm watching TV, I'm just going to enjoy watching TV. If I'm with friends, I'm going to enjoy being friends. Like, so I think being honest with that, and if you're hungry and you need food and you like snacks, have a snack, make it fit. But I do find too, another great exercise I like is just don't do it for a week. Make yourself not do it for a week, make real stakes. And when you break that habit, like for me, I'm totally fine checking out with my food at 5, 6, 7 p.m. and kind of calling it there. Lately, I have been doing just like a chocolate Fairlife milk Ninja Creamy with like 2 or 3 Oreos at night and been enjoying that. Of course, yes, there's a little bit of sugar in there. Is it the healthiest thing in the world? Absolutely not. Is it going to kill me? Absolutely not. And I haven't really minded doing that too much. My calories a little higher. I'm maintaining. So I've been personally fine with that, but I also don't mind doing without. So I think really analyzing what works best for you, but just avoiding just going off the deep end for no reason whatsoever. And listen, if you want to learn how you can have all your favorite foods, have no food restrictions, and really learn to have a healthy relationship with food where you can enjoy treats, you can go out to dinner, you can still hit your goals, you can put on muscle and lose fat, we will take care of all that hard work for you and explain how to do it, not just for now, but for life. If you want to learn more about our coaching, take all the guesswork out, know you're getting the best advice and the clearest path forward to your journey, click that first link. That's our website. You can apply to work one-on-one with me and Kyle there. And I challenge you, make this decision for you, because you can spend the rest of your life saying, oh, I'll do it eventually, or I'll figure it out. Or you could just sign up today, create that change. And in summer, we're going to have you ripped on a beach feeling fantastic. So I look forward to helping you. If you love the episode today, it'd mean a lot if you leave a review. It really does help us a lot. So if you could take 2 seconds to do it, if you haven't already, you'll be the best. But thanks for tuning in today. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace out.